Today begins the first in a 7-series session, technical training sessions. We're going to start today with talking about just some of the basics on how TouchStone is organized, and then mostly we're going to focus here on the 4 functions list and talk about how to build your 4 functions. Throughout the technical training series, I'll usually start with technically how to do things, like how to use the functions within TouchStone, and then I'll also weave in some strategic ideas along the way that will let you know more strategies behind how to do things. If you have a particular question about the subject we're talking about, it's very interesting to other people on the call. So again, when I get those questions, then I'll try to answer them. And real life examples are, are great. And real challenges that you're having are not only interesting to get for you to be answered, but also for everyone else on the line. We're also going to be doing a system of the week in each training session. So towards the end of the session, I'll highlight a system from our library, and I'll kind of talk about what it's about and how to implement it. So what we're looking at now is the TouchStone home screen. And what is going on here on the home screen is there's functionality that allows you to use processes. So over here on the 4 functions in the organization chart, we're going to be talking about how to document processes and how to organize them by position on the org chart. But here on the home screen, this is more advanced functionality that gives you the ability to use your processes, to manage them, to control them, to innovate them, and to have methods by which your employees can access what they're accountable for and actually implement and use the processes. So all of the home screen functionality is, the webinar is at the end of the 7-series training session. But as we go through and talk about the documenting and organizing these 2 functions, I'll loop to the control panel and kind of show you examples of how you can use that. In the upper right-hand corner of your screen, there are some control functions. The first button is called Account Administration, and this gives you access to your user list. So you can set up users and give them access to TouchStone and Account Administration, and there'll be a webinar specifically on this, but this is where you go to set access and to create users for your system. We have a search feature here. So if you forget what you called something or you want to search for a particular title, type the partial word or the whole word into the search field, and then you can search specifically for things, or you can search all and find what you're looking for. To the right of the search is the user manual. So this is a complete index of everything that's inside of TouchStone, and it's all hyperlinked to the subject area. So if you want to know how to do a particular thing in TouchStone, you can choose it from the user manual, and you'll see a little screenshot with that function. To the right of this is the user settings. So Account Administration gives you access to all users and all user settings. But when you're not an administrator, you haven't been made an administrator to the system, first of all, you won't see this Account Administration button. And the way that you would access what your username and password is by going to the user settings. The logout button is all the way to the right. So we suggest that when you're finished with TouchStone for the day that you log out. If TouchStone goes for more than 5 hours with no activity, so nothing happens with it, it's just sitting in your browser, it will log itself out automatically. But it does stay active for those 5 hours without activity. So we do it this way because we kind of want to mirror software, so you don't have to be logging in and logging out all the time. And as long as you're clicking and doing things within TouchStone, it will stay active for that time period. If you do leave for the day, it's always just good internet protocol to log everything out, including TouchStone. So we're going to go right now and talk about the 4 key functions. So to access the 4 key functions, you simply click the 4 key functions tab. What's happening in the 4 functions is this is the place where your master list of processes are kept. So all the processes that you have in TouchStone will be accessible and organized here in the 4 key functions. The first function Someone has a question about the search feature. Okay. So this is from Eric. He's just pointing out that in the search feature, which we covered right here, if an employee who doesn't have access to a specific process searches for that process, they're going to see it on the search list, which is actually a bug that needs to get fixed. But when they go to select that process from the search list, they get an error message saying you don't have access to this process. But I do know that that's a bug, and I'm hoping to get it fixed in the next release, which is actually in another month or so, if not before then. So he's just basically saying that those employees will be able to see that list of processes, even though they don't have access to them, but they can't select them and use them. Okay, so 4 key functions. Guiding the business is the uppermost function here in yellow, and this is for all of your strategic and managerial processes. So this is where all of those processes related to guiding the business, how you guide employees and how you guide the business itself. Getting the business is for all of your marketing strategy, sales, and advertising processes. So all the ways and methods that you get new business in the door. Doing the business is your operations. So once you've made a sale over here, this is everything related to delivering that product or service to your customers. Running is administration and finance. So this is the support function, you might say. It's all of your ways of calculating, generating, and managing the business overall in running the business. So with these 4 key areas, we're looking at the business as a whole, and we're seeing all the functions and everything that exists within it. One of the values of the 4 key functions, or having a process list in general, is that as a business owner and even as an employee, you start to see the business as a set of processes. It's a set of systems and work instructions which explain how all the results of your business happen. And it's a different perspective than what we see in the organization chart here, which is people all running around doing things. So it's an entrepreneurial exercise to be able to see your business as a set of working processes. When we select one of the 4 functions, it takes you to what we call the subfunctions. So the subfunctions are categories within that function. So here we're guiding the business, and I see it right here at the top. And now I'm seeing all the subfunctions of the categories within it. So here I've got employee management, which is a very common subfunction inside of guiding the business, training maybe, board of directors, and strategy, all of your strategic processes. So first thing you want to do when you approach your 4 functions is you want to define your subfunctions, the categories. So everything related to the subfunctions is controlled here under the subfunction tab. So if I want to add a subfunction, I choose Add, and I put in the new title of my subfunction, and I hit Save. So then the subfunction's been added down here at the bottom. The subfunctions toggle back and forth from left to right. If I want to edit a subfunction, I'd hit the subfunction that I want to edit, change it to the new title, and then hit Save. And so now it's just edited the title of that function down here at the bottom. So the subfunctions are completely controlled by you. Whatever you want them to be, you can customize them to be that. Delete subfunction. If I go to delete a subfunction like employee management, say, and hit delete, TouchStone will not delete that because it's got processes in it. So it's saying you've got to, that error message said, you've got to remove or delete all the processes within it before you can delete that subfunction, which is obviously a good thing because you don't want to delete a whole list of processes by mistake. If I go and delete a subfunction like this one, say, that doesn't have anything in it, I just put that in there and hit delete, then it's going to remove that subfunction. You can also reorder your subfunctions. So you choose reorder, you see the reorder window, and you can move these up and move these down to adjust the order, and then you hit save, and it, again, adjusts the order going from left to right, back and forth. So here inside of guiding the business, some typical subfunctions are going to be strategy, strategic processes, This is your business development type work. You're growing and analyzing and strategizing your business. Employee management. So these are all of the methods by which you would manage every employee in the company. How you get results through other people. Training. So all your training processes for those employees. And board of directors as well. So a lot of you might be thinking, well, we don't really have a board because we're a small company, but this TouchStone in the building of your processes is also about thinking into the future and really identifying the processes and the work that you know you need to be doing in the future. So these are common subfunctions inside of guiding the business. And when I say common, I mean that they're pretty standard from industry to industry. So most businesses need these types of processes. Let's go to getting the business. So getting the business is getting your business in the door, how and the methods of the processes by which you do that. So some typical subfunctions in getting the business are going to be advertising or lead generation, sales or lead conversion, depending on what term you like better. So how you get new business in the door and all the methods for that. Sales, once you've got a qualified lead, how you convert that into a sale. Sales management. So this is different from employee management over in guiding. Employee management is related to managing of all employees and those standard procedures in which you do that. Sales management is more specific to the sales department. So it's what does the sales manager or the management function need to accomplish? They need to evaluate indicators. They need to create reports. They need to have sales meetings specifically with the salespeople. And then marketing strategy. So marketing strategy is the strategic side of marketing. So developing of a marketing plan, studying your geographics, creating strategic alliances, creating an advertising plan. So again, these are some common sub-functions inside of getting the business, and these are generally the ones that I see even from industry to industry. Some method of doing marketing strategy, the strategic side, advertising, generating leads, converting those leads, and then managing the whole process, or all the processes. This is next, running the business. And you'll notice I'm toggling back and forth between the functions right here in this view. I can always go here and see them and get them from there, but this is a quicker way to get from one to the other. So I'm clicking running. So here in running the business, some common sub-functions are going to be human resources, which is different from employee management. Human resources is more about the onboarding and the policy side of having employees. So it's not day-to-day management. So we keep it in the running the business function because it's more policy overall running of your business and your employees. Now, having said that, you know, move TouchStone around to how it suits you the best. If you'd rather see all of your human resource processes over in guiding, fine. If you'd rather see all of your management processes over in running, then fine, it's up to you. Finance is another typical subfunction. So this is all the bookkeeping processes. I have a question about editing functions. Are we able to edit or modify subfunctions? Yeah. So up here, where I showed you before, this is how you control the subfunctions. So all the subfunctions are customizable by you. I'm just giving you some kind of boilerplate general ideas on what's typical inside of most companies. But here, it's customizable by you. You can add new ones, you can edit the ones that exist, delete, and reorder. So finance is, again, everything related to bookkeeping mostly. Bringing the money in, sending the money out. Financial management is another subfunction I like because it breaks up the finance processes into more strategic type things, more things a controller or a CPA would do or a finance manager, as opposed to bookkeeping type processes. So financial management has got things like cash flow, budgeting, the higher level finance activities. Then we have admin, administration, so these are all your administrative processes. And another common subfunction is IT, information technology, so everything related to how your computer processes work. Now let's go to doing. In doing the business, here's where it gets pretty customized customized by your industry. So depending on the products and services that you deliver, what industry you're in, these sub-functions are going to be related to that. One common sub-function here in doing the business is usually customer satisfaction or client service, whatever you call them, customers or clients. So every company, in my opinion, should have some amount of processes for satisfying their customers, ensuring that they're satisfied. Sometimes I see this customer satisfaction in getting the business just because for whatever industry you're in or how your business is organized, you consider more the salespeople and that department to be responsible for customer satisfaction. Sometimes it's in operations. I more commonly see it in operations because it's about the quality of the service. And the quality of the service is created by the operations or the production of the service department. They may go back to sales and say, hey, you oversold this or you promised things that we didn't deliver and the customer is therefore unsatisfied. So then it becomes a sales issue as well. But for the most part, it's mostly operations dependent. So if you're in a service business, you may have a service subfunction like this, and then you're listing all the ways that you deliver your service. If you deliver multiple services, you may have multiple service subfunctions, one for service to residential, one for service to commercial. If you're in a production or a manufacturing or an operational type of industry, you may have a production or a delivery subfunction or a manufacturing subfunction. Production management of some sort or service management should be in there as well. If you deal with material, shipping and receiving, a warehouse, you might have material control or warehouse subfunction. If you're in a restaurant, you may have front of the restaurant and back, so the cooking and then the service in the front. If it's retail, you'd have all of your sales processes would be over here, but you may have the operating of the counter processes. Then you'd have inventory control. So think about the categories of work within your type of industry. If you have questions about this at all, then you can always contact us and we'll help you because we've seen every industry. You know, every industry has had a TouchStone account at one point or another, so I've seen pretty much all kinds of different structures for subfunctions. When you're creating your subfunctions, try to think of your own words for this. So you may see me use the word service here, but if you like to call it, you know, delivering exceptional service subfunction, then use the terminology that's comfortable to you and your employees. Along those lines, if you don't like the getting, doing, guiding, running terminology here, is that all confusing to you? Some people, it really sings to them. It's like, oh, I really get it now. Like, this is really helping me, this language. Other people look at it and say, this is so confusing. I don't know what's getting or running. So if you have any kind of angst about the getting, doing, running at all, then change it. Right here with this edit pencil, you can hit edit function title. You can delete doing the business and just put operations or just put manufacturing, whatever term you like best. What I would suggest, though, is that you keep the themes. So don't make this sales and this advertising because, you know, then you're going to run out of sub-functions. You have to keep the categories kind of whole. So once you're happy with your sub-functions, the next step would be to add processes. So how you add a process is you go here where it says Add New Process. You're going to put in the name of your process. Then you're going to choose the sub-function that you want it to go in. So you see the drop-down here, and all your sub-functions will appear. And then you hit Save. Easy as that. So now I've just added this process down here, and it appears at the bottom of the list. This process is red because it doesn't have anything in it. So if I click this, it takes me to this screen, which is where we document the process. These are the tools in which you document with. But there's nothing in this yet. It hasn't been, no documentation has been started. And the legend up here will remind you of that. Not started, there's nothing in it. When a process is blue, like this one, it lets you know there's something in it. So over here, I've got some tools built here. I've got a work plan, some forms. So this process has been, it's in process. It's been starting, the documentation has been started. When you're finished with the documentation, you can turn it black, like this one is. And I make a process complete, or I turn it black by flipping this flag called Process Documentation Completed. Then it turns the process title black. So if I went to this process, that's red now, and I put in a work plan, and I started to document the process, so here's the work plan, you'll go back and notice that now it's blue. So that lets me know there's something inside of it. When I'm finished with the documentation, I manually turn it black, it's done, and now it's complete. So that's what this color coding is about. On the home screen, there's a folder we call the public folder, which is right here. And this is more to do with the using of processes. When you put a process in the public folder, it makes it available to all users. So everybody in the entire company who has access to TouchStone will be able to go here and access these processes. When they access a process from the public folder, like time management here, it takes them to the content of the process. And I can go here to fill out this checklist, so I'm using the process here. So I can't edit or change anything, I'm using it. So the public folder is for processes that are company-wide information. They're not the accountability of 1 or 2 or even 3 people. They're information the entire company needs to have and use. So on your 4 functions list, you'll also notice in the legend that you can mark something as public, which means you put it in the public folder. So if I chose this process and hit this button, it's going to now be in the public folder, and I'll notice from the 4 functions list, it's got a little P next to it. So we'll talk way more about the public folder when we get more into this training series, but I just wanted you to know what that means. It's more about the use of the process. When you put it in the public folder, everyone has access to use it. Usually processes that are in the public folder generally come from running the business, and there are a lot of them are in the HR subfunction. This tends to be the subfunction where it's company-wide information. In other words, everyone needs to use it. Someone's asking, do you keep a database of work plans, forms that our companies are using so you don't have to use them yourself? So I'm going to answer that question here in a second about getting examples of processes. So adding a process right here, add new process. To Mitzi's question, another way to get processes into your account, and I'm going to go, I'll go to this function, is to add them from our library. So here we have a library of processes. Each function on the 4 functions list has its own library. So if I'm in here and getting the business and I go to the library, I'm going to see things related to marketing, advertising, and sales. Here I'm going to see things related to strategy and management. Here, admin, finance, HR, and so on. So if you go to the library, you add from process library. If you aren't a construction company or an insurance company, then don't bother going into these libraries because those processes won't be useful for you. If you are a construction company or an insurance company, I would suggest you first start with the general library. Once you've pulled over what you want from that, then go and look at these 2 libraries. So hit the general process library. Then you're going to see a list of processes related to this function. So we're in running the business now. All of these processes are related to finance, admin, HR, everything running the business. So you can hover over the processes and you see the objective, so you see the purpose of the process. You can't really see what's in it until you pull it over into your account. Somewhere around, I'm thinking now, around 80% of these processes have got some amount of content in them. So they've got something to kind of get you started. Some of the processes are just titles. They're just suggested titles or processes that you should have and document. Some of these processes are grayed out right here, and it's because they're already in my demo account. So once you move a process over into the library, you can't move it over twice. It shows you, this is already in your system. So look through the libraries if you haven't already, and take the processes that you like or that you want to use. It's good to go one sub-function at a time. So I'd go admin, and I'd look through and say, what is it, everything related to admin that I want? Then I add that. Then I go back, and I go finance and move everything from finance. So it's fine to move it all into one function because you can drag and drop to the other sub-functions, but you can organize it initially pretty well if you just go one sub-function at a time. So to get a library process, you just choose, fill in the blank for the one that you want, and then you just hit save at the bottom. So now it's put this library process into my system. It's right down here at the bottom. Everything is drag and drop here. So I put this into admin, but this admin service request, it probably belongs in admin, but for whatever, if I wanted to move it to HR, I just drag and drop it over. So moving processes from one function to one sub-function to another is pretty easy. If the process comes across blue like this one, well then it lets you know there's something in it, right? So you can look at it and see what's inside of it. Sometimes there are suggested work plans. Sometimes there are suggested forms like you see here. Sometimes there are fully built out work plans. So the library, number one, is meant to give you an idea of the types of processes that you might want to have in this function. And then secondly, it's meant to give you some structure to that, an idea on how to build it. Rarely do I think you can take a library process and just kind of use it as is. You typically need to go in and edit it and kind of make it your own. If you pull a library process, any library process, and you go and look at it and you think, this is just not something we're ever going to use, or you think, this is not something we're going to implement and use in the next 6 months to a year, say. I think 6 months is usually a good time frame for that. Then I would suggest you delete it, and it will put it back into the library, and then you can pull it down in 6 months. The last thing you want to do is go and just go crazy and download every library process and then just have it sit there. And a lot of people get all excited and like, we want this, 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 and they take it all. And then it's a good idea, and it's things you know you need to document and use, but it's really not the priority right now. And the priority is other things. So the consequence is you have all these library processes in there kind of making it look more confusing than it needs to be, when really what you need to do is just zero in on what do you need to document in the next 6 months or in the next year. If I take this library process and I pull this to the delete folder, which is how you delete, and I let go, it's going to give me this warning message or error message. It's going to say you can't delete this because it's either on a job description or it's got tools inside of it. So anything that's blue, you can't delete. And the reason is this has got some tools in it right here. This has got some documentation in it. So if I want to delete a library process, I have to go to every tool inside of it. I have to hit delete and say, okay, now that's gone. And I got to go here, and then I hit delete again, and then that's gone. And now I've got to make sure it's not on any job descriptions if you've already built your job descriptions. And this is a quick way to look at that. And then you can go back, and now it's red. And then I can drag it to the delete folder. So this methodology for deleting it was born out of people accidentally deleting things. So there's a reason for it. And the reason is if you don't make it methodical to delete or a conscious effort to delete, then anybody could accidentally delete something. So the only time where it becomes a bit of a pain is when you've pulled a library process over, and then you look at it, you know, I don't want this, and then you have to go through and delete everything. So that's the logic behind delete, and also the understanding of how you delete. When you delete the library process, like that one I just deleted, it will be available in the library again. So the minute it's been deleted from TouchStone completely, then it puts it back into the library, and 6 months later you can go down and download it again if you like. This, again, is the edit function title, how you edit getting, doing, guiding, running. This next icon over is our export features. You're going to see this icon all throughout TouchStone. It lives on every TouchStone page. And when I hit this, it gives me the option to print this 4 functions list. So whatever's behind you, it will print. You can export it to Word. You can export it to a PDF, or you can email it. So everything in TouchStone exports in these variety of ways, directly to your printer, to Microsoft Word, so it can be edited, or to a PDF, and to an email. One of the benefits of having a system like TouchStone is that it's paperless, right? And it's version controlled. Everything that's the most current version of everything you have is in TouchStone. The minute you start exporting and emailing and saving to your network and exporting the 4 functions and editing it in Word and then doing a save as, now you've got multiple versions of these things all over your network, as well as you have TouchStone, but now you've got what is the most current version. Well, I exported that last week and then so-and-so edited it. Well, it's not in TouchStone yet. It just makes my skin crawl when I hear that because it's unnecessary. The reason you have this web tool, or hopefully you're learning, is that it's moving your business to a new level, which is automated, which is paperless, streamlined, efficient, not confusing, everything organized in its right place, everything up to date all the time. So resist the urge to export if you can. And that goes for everything in TouchStone. Get into the habit of, instead of, if you want your manager or your admin department to look at this 4 functions list and give you feedback, go and copy the URL right here. You're logged in, hot copy, send them an email, paste that URL into the email and say, go look at the 4 functions list. Or if you want them to look at this service admin request, go here, copy the URL, copy, paste it into an email and send it to them. Then all they have to do is be logged into TouchStone, they click that link, and they'll go right to what you were talking about. So try to develop new methods within your business for communicating about the processes. If you have to export things, then you have to. But just remember, once it's exported, now you've got another version. So let's talk about some strategic things around building your 4 functions list. So the first thing, we talked about building subfunctions. So in these 3 subfunctions, you heard me talk about some common subfunctions within each. So here, marketing strategy, sales, advertising, sales management. Here it's strategic processes, employee management, training, board of directors. Here it's typically finance, financial management, HR, IT, admin. And here, it's directly related to your industry. So it's the different functions or sub-areas within your industry, your operations, what you deliver, what you service, your equipment. The next key, once you've got process titles set, would be to then actually list, or sub-function set would be to then list your processes. So there's a bit of an art to listing of the processes. First of all, you want to think of clear, specific titles. So customer complaints, client satisfaction, client intake, production, installation, cleaning. So think of specific process titles. If I see a process title that is more than 4 words, generally question it and say, how can we make this more of a title? You don't want to build a sentence to be your process title. You want to think of specific titles. With that in mind, think of a protocol for putting in the titles. So I like capitalize every word. Sometimes I see people with capitalize client and then intake is not capitalized, and it looks more like a sentence to me. So think of your protocol for that. Because if you have multiple people working in TouchStone, which you ideally want to do, and they're all putting in titles in differently, then suddenly it's all going to look different. If you want some suggestions on what the process titles should be like or what they might look like, then go look in our library. There's some good suggestions or some ideas on that. So think of clear, specific titles. When you put a process in, you should go to that process right away. So this is the one that I put in earlier as an example. And right underneath the title here, there's what we call the objective. Click this field, then I can put in the purpose of the process, the objective, the point of it. So this is where like a sentence or a phrase would go, a description of what is in this process. And it can generally start with a how to do this or to ensure that, the how-tos of this process. So by defining it or putting the objective, you're, first of all, giving everyone a chance who's looking at that to know exactly what's in it. You're reminding yourself of the scope of the process, so kind of what's the beginning and the end of it. And then you're also going to be able to remember what you meant when you put that process title in, which sounds silly, but it's not. When you're putting in lots of process titles, sometimes you put it in, you're thinking, who was thinking that, or what was this for? So here's an example of one. Customer complaints. Resolve and learn from each customer complaint through efficient follow-up and distribution of information. It's kind of a mouthful, but that's the idea. So it's the purpose. We know that this is about how to resolve and how to learn from each customer complaint. So every time you put these process titles in, fill in that objective right away. Anybody who's putting process titles in, have them fill out that objective right away. If you've got process titles that are long, consider taking whatever you were trying to accomplish with that title and putting it into the objective, because you're really getting into describing what it's about rather than just naming it. Second thing about process titles, you want to combine like results into processes. So customer complaints, for example. Everything related to customer complaints is here inside of this customer complaint process. So I've got a work plan on how to deal with the complaint. There's a script in here. Here's a form. Here's action forms. So I wouldn't want a process on the 4 functions that says customer complaints and then another one that says customer complaint form or customer complaint anything. Everything related to customer complaints would be here inside this process. Let's go to another example. Here in running the business. What's a good example? Here's accounts payable. Everything related to accounts payable is inside of this accounts payable process. And when I select this, you'll see here how to create an invoice, how to do special invoices, how to pay things with credit card and HCS, how to make check payments, how to make bank deposits. These are all different workflows. If there's a work plan for how to create invoices, there's a whole other work plan for how to make deposits. There's a whole other work plan with a whole set of tasks on how to do a check run, how to cut checks. So these are separate workflows, different things that are happening, but all related to accounts payable. So they're all inside of the payables process. If I was to not do it this way, then I would have I'd have 5 processes on my 4 functions list here under finance, all related to payables. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that per se, but what it does create is way more processes. If you combine things, then you're tidying up your 4 functions list. You're making it easier to find things, and you're putting in like results and like workflows together. So think about that when you're putting in your process titles. If it helps you when you're identifying your process titles to put in something like accounts payable, then go in right away and list out the work plans too. You don't have to go in and document them all at that point in time, but you can at least list them, and then you kind of make sure that you identified what you were thinking when you listed out accounts payable. Here's another example, new employee introduction and orientation. So everything around onboarding of a new employee is going to be here. What else? Recruiting. Everything related to recruiting a new employee is here. So how to putting ads into the paper or an internet. How to interview or assess resumes as they come in. How to offer interviews, which is the next step. So everything relating to recruiting is here inside this process. Here's a question. Would you recommend numbering the order in which you complete the processes? Say step 1 needs to be done before step 2. Numbering the order in which you complete the processes. Julie, do you mean the order in which the employee does the tasks, or are you talking about prioritizing how you would document the process? So I didn't quite understand her question. If we look at, like, let's look at workplace safety. This is everything related to workplace safety. I've got work plans in here which list out 1, do this, 2, do that, 3, do that. So that is documenting the order in which the employee performs these tasks. So that is done for you in TouchStone, because each work plan is going to have a step-by-step, and each task is generally in a sequential order. You do this and the next and the next. If you're talking about the order in which you document the processes, I think the best, I think I'm on time, so I'll go into this just for a minute. Once you've built your 4 functions list, you would then build your organization chart, which we're talking about next week. Then you would build your job description for every position. And the job descriptions are built by linking processes from the 4 functions list to the positions. So when TouchStone is organized completely and fully, you'll have every process from the 4 functions list linked to one position or another here on your org chart. At that time is when the documentation should start, in my opinion. List out your processes, go and build your org chart, and build all the job descriptions. It doesn't take that much time. I think I've done this hundreds of times, and I think somewhere between 5 to 10 hours at the most to get to that result. Once that's done, go into each position and prioritize the processes. Put them in order of priority. You can reorder these later in workflow or whatever you want, but this is the most important process we're going to document first, then this one, and then step through documenting them. So that's how I would handle how to actually prioritize the documentation. So I don't know which question was yours, but I think I answered both possibilities. So listing out the processes. So here's kind of a higher level thought, and this will maybe be helpful for those of you who have done your 4 functions list already. And this has to do with process titles and when to combine things and when not to. So you'll notice here I've got a process on recruiting, and there's also a process for interviewing. Here's the interviewing. Then I've got a process down here called hiring admin. So this is how to recruit, place the ad, screen the candidates, go through resumes, decide who's going to get an interview. Here's the interviewing process where a manager typically does the interview, decides who to hire and who not. The admin portion is the admin portion. So it could be doing reference checks once somebody's been approved for hire, doing drug testing, sending out rejection letters. So this is generally done by an administrative position. It's still related to hiring or recruiting, but it's generally done by an administrative position. If you have processes like that, where it's the same subject area, like recruiting, but there's an admin portion, there's a finance portion, there's a management portion, then that might be an example of when you would want to build 3 separate processes for that, or 2, like we've done here. And the reason for that is When you go to link it to a job description, I'll link this maybe to HR manager where, maybe the interviewing is going to be to all managers' job descriptions. So when something, you can always, label a work plan and say done by admin or done by management if you want inside of the process, and then link it to everybody's job description. And this is just a judgment call. But when it is two functional departments, then you can break it up into two separate processes. All right, so starting from the beginning before we get into the system of the week, for functions list is for a master list of all your processes. Go in and define every subfunction. So create your subfunctions or your functional areas. Go in and list all your processes. Add new process, think of short specific titles, combine like results. Think of everything that you need to get done in your business. If it helps you to think in workflow order, that works in certain situations. So like in getting the business, I can think, okay, the phone rings, that's admin. It gets transferred to sales. They do a setting appointments. Someone answers that call and sets the appointment for sales. The salesperson then confirms all the information. They then have a needs assessment. So think through the step-by-step, which will help you kind of define the processes. That works, in workflow situations, doing the business or operations and sales. Doesn't work all that great in some situations in running or in guiding. So think through that step-by-step. Go to the library. Pull down processes that you want from the library. Have the result be that you've got a fully built out 4 functions list. Once you get to that place, then you can move on to organization chart and job descriptions, which we'll talk about next week. But try to get your 4 functions list listed out as best that you can. If you've had TouchStone for a while and you just, say, worked on your sales list and nothing else, consider getting other departments involved and spreading it out and trying to list out all the other processes. At minimum, it's going to kind of show you where processes connect, which is something we'll get into when we talk about the documentation of the process. But there may be places where you need information from one process to finish another, or one process needs to go from information from one area of the business needs to flow to another. It's the same idea, one process to another. Once you make a sale, you complete a contract, that's got to go to finance. We'll take the time to just at least identify those financial procedures. Any question before we move to the system of the week? No, I don't think so. So I've been doing a lot of reading, and I ran across this great new book. I can't remember the name of it now, but it was all about customer service. And it got me thinking about the customer service processes inside of TouchStone and how little I kind of see those implemented and used. And so I decided this system of the week, we're going to talk about customer or client satisfaction. You'll see us toggle back and forth between terms inside of the library processes just because some people call it client, some call it customer. The idea is for you to edit this and make it your own. So this is a typical client satisfaction process. This is got some very kind of general boilerplate kind of information in it. It's meant to give you the idea of a client satisfaction process or a customer satisfaction process, and then make it your own, make it work for you. We've got this little set of statistics inside of here which I thought were useful to kind of set the stage for this. So client satisfaction is incredibly important. A lot of businesses think that customers are so extremely price sensitive that they're going to go from one business to another because on price alone. Price is not the main reason. It's actually due to poor quality of service. A customer is 4 times more likely to defect to a competitor, and the problem is always service related, not price. So you're delivering poor service to that client. There's no communication. Whatever the situation is, that's why they leave. The probability of selling to an existing customer is 60 to 70%. The probability of selling to a new prospect is 5 to 20%. So you can see it right there, and you all know it's true. Once you have a relationship with someone, it's easy to sell more to that person. It's easier to keep that person than it is to go out and spend all the advertising efforts to then convert a new prospect. Every customer complaint, for every customer complaint, there is 26 other unhappy customers. 2% of customer retention, it has the same effect of decreasing costs by 10%. So if any of you are sitting there looking at your balance sheet and your financial statements at the end of the year and thinking, boy, what would it take to get 10% more? Think about this. An increase to your customer retention will decrease your costs by 10%. 96% of unhappy customers don't complain. However, 91% of those simply leave and never come back. A dissatisfied customer will tell 9 to 15 people about their experience. Around 13% of dissatisfied customers tell more than 20 people. Happy customers who get their issue resolved tell 4 to 6 people about their experience. And we've all had this experience. Like, you're not perfect. Like, you're going to make mistakes. We make mistakes. Everyone does. But acknowledging it and trying to resolve it, that experience alone is what customer satisfaction can be about. Of course, you want to satisfy your customers all the time, every time, without question. But you do make mistakes. And so it's this process we're looking at now is all about resolving them. A 5% reduction in customer defections, so customers leaving, will increase profits by 95%. It costs 67 times more to acquire a new customer than retaining an existing one. So you get the idea. And I know everyone's thought about this. It's a common thing to consider. But it's also an easy thing to ignore because we're all so busy, right? You're busy. You're trying to get it done. You do your best. Your people are doing their best. But before you know it, there's just holes in your bucket all over the place. And a lot of it has to do with customer service and the quality of your service. So this customer service idea or satisfaction process is about you coming up with a way, a method, a simple method of just touching base with your customers and asking how it went. That's all. So this is a simple, set of tasks on how to do a customer survey. If you just send out surveys and expect customers to fill them out and send them back, they're not going to do it. I should have had a statistic on that. It's very low. There's a lot of online tools for, fill out the survey, and most customers just don't do it. And I think it goes back to that one statistic about, when you're unhappy, you don't want to just fill out a survey. You're just going to leave. So I think making a phone call or doing something personal is important. So this says within 2 working days of completion of the project, or if you are in a different kind of industry where you have an ongoing relationship with your customers, every 6 months you call them. So figure out your own timing around this. Have someone call. The time it would take for someone to call is going to be far less than the impact of losing that customer if you think about the statistics. So ask the customer how their experience went and ask them to fill out a survey. You can email them the survey. So if I'm talking to you and I say, hey, will you fill out my survey? How was your experience? It was great. So glad to hear it. Oh, it wasn't so great? Well, let me go through the customer complaint process with you, which is another process hyperlinked right here. Or I'm going to send you the survey. Would you please fill it out and send it back? They're going to be more likely to send it back. Or once you have them there on the phone, you can take them through the survey. So think about what's efficient and what's effective for you, and then build a simple work plan on it. Build a script for it. So here's an example script. How did the project go? If the job went well, then you say this. Would you consider asking for a referral? That's another bonus of customer service processes or customer satisfaction processes. If your customers are extremely happy, ask for referrals. If it didn't go well, take them through your customer complaint process. Figure out what happened. Figure out what happened in that project and then go back to the process which created that issue and innovate that process. So here's one of the powerful things about TouchStone and about systems development in general. If there's a problem, it's created by a process either that you don't have, or it's not working well, or employees aren't following. So when you get these little gems of customer feedback, if you take those and go back to the process that created it and innovate it, then you've solved that problem forever, or at least until it changes. That's how you really make changes. Just hearing of a service issue and then going to the service department or into the warehouse and saying, hey, you guys, this happened, that happened, this customer's pissed off, they left. That they're just going to blah, blah, blah. That's all they hear. Hopefully someone will try to change, but it doesn't really change. So building a process for how to make those changes, sitting everyone down saying, this is the problem we had, this is the solution, let's step through it, that causes real change. It creates more efficiency, and it's going to stop the holes in your bucket. So throughout this process, you've got some example surveys. So here's just a typical example survey. These are all widely available on the internet as well. You probably find a ton of customer satisfaction survey examples. Here's one that can be an email. So it's an example email that could go out. I think this is another sample over-the-phone survey. So you get the customer on the phone. You say, this is the person calling. This is what they ordered, the date. This is my name, who I spoke with. I left a message. They were unhappy. So you have the employee fill this out as they're talking to the customer. In fact, they can do this right in TouchStone, by the way, because with that home screen functionality, which we'll be highlighting as we keep going on, they could call up this form, fill it out, save it back to TouchStone. You could run a report at the end of the month and say, hey, give me all the customer satisfaction surveys and get a list of all of those and review them. Here's a list of client service standards. Even if you're not going to document a whole process on this, which clearly I think you should, but even if you don't, develop a list of customer service standards. What do we believe in here? What do we aim to do? This simple act can help shape how your employees act. So here's a list of examples. You can go through and modify these and kind of make your own. Even come up with 5 and say, this is what we aim to do. This is what we want to give to our customers. So you can go into the process library right here inside of doing the business and download that customer service process as well as the customer complaints process, which really is connected with this one. And think through your own customer satisfaction process. So next week we are going to be talking about organization strategy. So I'm going to be discussing how to use the org chart inside of TouchStone, which is pretty straightforward and simple. So mostly what I'm going to be talking about is good organization strategy. So how to create a strategic vision for your organization through the organization chart. And that will be next time, same place. Thanks for coming, everybody. Bye-bye.